Good evening, everyone. Chief Annunziata and I are happy to be here this evening in this public forum at the invitation of the Boylston Board of Selectmen. We want you to know that we both support the role of the school resource officer in our schools as a proactive measure towards safety and security in all possible scenarios, and because it builds positive relationships with students, staff, administrators, and families. So the purpose of tonight's forum really is to inform the public about the role of the SRO in schools and what they can bring to our schools. Also, we want to be able to listen to your concerns, answer questions, and unravel some of the confusions or misunderstandings about the role of the resource officer, particularly as it relates to our school community and our culture. And also to gauge the pulse of the community and whether or not to move forward with funding for the SRO position in our Boylston Elementary School and Tohoto Regional Middle High School. So tonight we look forward to an open, honest conversation with the stakeholders in our audience and appreciate your interest and willingness to attend. Tonight we'll hear from Chief Annunziata, Chief Shartner from the Berlin Police Department, and Sergeant Dave Goulding from the Berlin Police Department, who serves as the school liaison officer at Berlin Memorial School, about the benefits of this role. And you'll hear a little bit from me as well. After we get a chance to do the presentation, we're going to open up the floor to questions and concerns. You see around you 2 microphones, and we'd ask you either to come up to the mic if you have questions, or we can bring the mic over to you if you're more comfortable with that. The idea here is to just have a dialogue with one another, to understand what you're worried about, to start to just open up those lines of communication. So at this time, I'd like to introduce the Boylston Police Chief, John Annunziata.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So if we don't answer all your questions today, feel free to ask at the end of it, or reach out to Carol or myself directly, and we'll get an answer back. All right. So the purpose of the school resource officer is just to enhance safety, build relationships. There's a lot that goes into a school resource officer. It's not just taking a patrol officer and sticking with the schools. It has to be the right person for the job. It has to be the person with the right temperament. There's a significant amount of training that goes into it. Goal is to build positive relationships between the police department, the staff, and the students, parents also. Key objectives: safety, security, education, drug and alcohol prevention, again, positive relationships, emergency response, community police, and youth outreach. Just, again, another resource for staff. There's a lot of facts, or there's a lot of misunderstanding of what a school resource officer is and what they are not. There are some people that think you're going to get Rambo. And then there are other people that think you're going to get a police officer that is just looking to arrest any student, staff member, et cetera, that they can. So this is kind of the facts and myths. People may ask, well, what do you mean an advocate for students? How does that work? There's a lot of there's a lot of stuff within the criminal justice system that just the lay person is not going to know. Having that school resource officer be present at school can help guide staff, students, and parents, guardians into these different resources, whether it's for mental health, substance abuse, truancy, the various different things. Having obviously law enforcement presence, that's been kind of a main front leader in the need for a school resource officer. Safety and security, crime prevention. There's a lot of, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the DARE program. There's still a DARE program. There's a competitor program called LEAD, Law Enforcement Against Drugs, that has different curriculum from pre-K up until seniors in school. This is all stuff that we'd like to implement within the school to, again, help educate people. And then obviously have us there for emergency response. a lot of people are misinformed. With a school resource officer cannot be used for administrative discipline. It was in the 2018 criminal justice reform, and it's also in our current MOU. I mean, the administrative issue is a school issue. The police officer, the school resource officer will not get involved. There's a lot of people that think it's just simply an armed guard without a purpose. Again, that there is very much a purpose for the school resource officer that we'll get into. That it's an over militarized mentality. Again, going back to that Rambo mentality, it's not that. And a uniformed approach, meaning that you take one school resource officer and apply it to every single school system. That's not the way it works. The school resource officers in Massachusetts are going to be widely variant upon their set. Policies and procedures should be reflective of your community values, and that's how the Boylston Police Department policies are. So the school resource officer, their standing operating procedures, their policies and procedures are all going to be reflective of our community. So in 2018, there was a juvenile justice reform. There's a lot that went into it. Basically, the takeaway is that there were a lot of nonviolent criminal offenses that were decriminalized. Nonviolent crimes such as disturbing a public assembly, disorderly conduct, things that were kind of the go-to catch-all if the police department needed to get involved. Those aren't a thing anymore. Though that's all considered administrative discipline now, which again, the police department can't get involved. They increased, the age from criminal responsibility from 7 to 12, meaning under 12, you can't get charged with a crime. And then it changes the way judges handle things if they are brought into the court system. One of the things that also touched upon was instituting the requirements for the school resource officers and just MOUs. Our current MOU, Chief Shatner took the lead on it. It mimics the Worcester County District Attorney's guidelines for our MOU. That's the one we have in place. So it was already it corrected things that other communities had to correct. Fortunately for us, we were already operating in that. There is cost to school resource officer. There's the ongoing expense, and then there's the initial upfront expense. Things such as vehicle, mobile radio, the initial health exams, and then the miscellaneous office equipment stuff to create a school resource office in the school. It adds up between $180,000 to $210,000 for year one, and that includes the officer's benefits, medical, dental, etc. You want to talk about the breakdown? So it's a shared cost between the Boylston Police Department, the town of Boylston, and the school district. So just for numbers, we estimated that 75% of the school resource officer's time would be spent at Tohoto, and 25% of the time would be spent at Boylston Elementary School. This number is subject to change. It's obviously very different reasons why the school resource officer would be at BES compared to Tohoto. BES is really going to be building those positive relationships, making themselves available for advocacy. Where in Tohoto, obviously larger group of people and usually more in-depth problems. But again, this is change. This is subject to change as the needs change. So again, it's in Massachusetts, where in the process of rolling out a new active threat training, where every Massachusetts police officer and firefighter is going to be trained in the exact same way, building those positive relationships. I was a product of a very if I didn't have a very involved police department and a very involved family, who knows what my path would have been. I've lived it. I've worked with school resource officers, and they do a lot of behind the scenes stuff that they don't get credit for. They're a safe person to talk to. They're the quiet room where students who maybe having a difficult time can go in there and do their classwork. The Wisconsin District Attorney's Office is rolling out this program. It's just called Handle with Care. It's for those kids that the school may not know what's going on in their personal life and their off time of school. And the role of this program is to, have the school resource officer, have the police department notify the school, not give particular details, but just say, hey, John Anziata, he's going to have a difficult day the next few days. Just handle with care. So if he's not prepared for that test, if he didn't come in with that homework, it's key to the staff say, cop said he needed to cut some slack. We'll cut him some slack. Those are all goals of this program. The districts in our immediate area, Clinton, Northborough, Shrewsbury, Wachusett, Westboro, they all have successful school resource officer programs. So
That's all?
yeah, I think that was the last.
Okay. So just to add to what John was talking about, I think we all understand it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to hear things that are going on, to share information with one another, to take care of our students in different ways. And how we see the resource officers looking at our schools from a different lens. I think that the principals can attest to the fact that a lot is going on here during the day. Much of it, of course, is academic and students are engaged, but other things are happening, kind of another layer of events that are taking place and incidents are taking place. We want to be mindful of what's happening as well there so that we can be proactive rather than reactive about addressing them. I looked at some statistics. I didn't bring them with me. I contemplated with sharing with you, the kind of fear piece of this, that the rise in school shootings, the rise in what's happening in our schools with our children. I don't think that's who we are necessarily as a community, but I think we all can say maybe, we might be. What can we do to help our children now in so many ways so we can avoid incidents in the future? And I think that that's really what we're trying to look at with the support of not only our resource officer, but the mental health providers that we have in the school. I did want to share with you that as I was thinking about who's in our school as far as mental health guidance. So we have, between our school psychologists, we have guidance counselors, we have adjustment counselors. We also have a family success partnership that we do with Assabet Valley Collaborative. In total, we spend about $730,000 a year on mental health providers and support among those individuals I mentioned for services for our children. So I don't think we lack in that kind of support for the small district, but this adds another lens for when we think about it. Not a lot of money for those 10-month period of time that we have them, because these individuals will then go on and serve in the community in the summertime. So we're looking at a 10-month period of time. From our perspective, the SRO brings to the table that safety and security of emergency response, not only because of those scary things we hear about every day with critical threats into our school, but also other kinds of incidents that are going on in school, emergency situations, checking doors, making sure everything is safe and secure for our children, watching the lens of suspicious behaviors, suspicious individuals. We have a really interesting side note. We, obviously, that we had a new food service group coming in. And so the first day that food service director came into the building, he didn't have any kind of identification with him.
So fortunately, he got stopped by the custodian and by one of the teachers who said, can you please, I'm sure you're doing something. Could you tell me who you are? He was wise. Those two individuals were wise enough to stop that individual. And he really appreciated it because who was he, right? How did he get in? He knew how he got in because he was the food service director, but others were not familiar with him. So this is just like another pair of eyes during the school day for us. I think it's true that these individuals, and particularly the person chosen for this position, will build those positive relationships. I support community policing. I think it's a different kind of policing than, as John said, that kind of the image of some of the higher, I would say higher, but different types of policing that we often see coming to the scene because they get to know our students. Eric and John Goody can tell you a little bit about that, just in still maintaining those relationships years beyond the children's time in school. So I think that's really important that they're proactive and that they get to know our students and certainly stay in touch with them long after their time here. Also, there's a portion of education and enforcement. For example, those opportunities to visit classrooms. John mentioned the DARE program over in Berlin and other types of programs that educate children not about the good and the bad, and I'm here to be scary, about making good choices in the future. Because the reality of it is there are consequences. And we don't think about it that way as our children are going through school. But in fact, when you get in the upper grades, if you're driving your car and you're a teenager, and some of us may have had that experience, like there's rules to follow. These individuals in a safe way can talk about that with them, can get to know them if they see them on the road and say, hey, your blinker is out, your headlight is out, where are you heading, whatever it is, not where you're heading, but like being concerned about what they're seeing. I think also talking about drugs, right, and alcohol situations that are going to affect these students if they do get consequences for that. So this is a way also, I think, too, the resource officers can be a resource to parents who need support, who need to be able to reach out to somebody in addition to the folks in the school setting to find out what about those legal ramifications, because these individuals are extremely knowledgeable, extremely helpful in that area as well. So the other thing I would just mention to you before I turn it over to Eric and Goody is the following. If we put this position in place, and you'll see this in the MOU that we gave out, it's not just that we hire the person and they go off. There's a significant amount of training and introduction to the community and voice that the community would have in the selection of this individual. Being able to come in and meet with the different organizations, meeting with the staff members, meeting with the administration, getting to know this. And they have continuous training. They're probably in the field of community policing, one of the most well-versed and trained in the field, because this is their work to do. So they get continuous training. They know how to de-escalate situations. And that's going to be really important for them to be able to work with students in that way. And then finally, that we will have a way for the chief to get feedback along with me from representative groups of teachers, parents, and students along the way. So there's checks and balances to this position as well. It's not just, again, we have to evaluate that individual annually. So there is a structure to all of this. I think if we look at that MOU that we made copies of, you'll be able to see that laid out a little more, not clearly, a little more extensively in that document. So with that, I'll ask Eric or Goody if you wanted to share any other thoughts before we turn it over to questions.
Terrible questions. We'd rather hear some of the questions because we're going to complement what John said.
Okay.
All right. There's a lot of questions that aren't on these slides. I'm sure people.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's do that. John Campbell he hasn't volunteered. Run the mic. He will bring the mic to you, or you are welcome to get up. There's a mic over by Eric and Goody if you would like to access that. Questions, concerns, comments for us?
Hi, Greg Cusimano. I just had a question. Is the SRO a unique individual or a position filled by more than one person?
No, so it would be, it would be one person. And more likely than not, it would be an external hire. I've talked to my staff. It's not something any one of my staff, would be interested in. So we would be hired externally, specifically for, the school resource officer position.
So then would that position be confined to the same vacation schedule as the school calendar?
No, so I reached out to other chiefs, and it was, do you backfill the position while they're on vacation? Do you limit their vacation? It's the general consensus was if they're going to be out for more than a few days in school now, they usually have a second person that's trained to be a school resource officer who would be the point of contact if there's an issue with the school. But no, they're not limited to the same schedule as the school.
And then, so the SRO we're talking about, which is service the Tohoto and BES, is Berlin not going to have an SRO? Would that be a separate person just to cover their elementary school?
It's, to my understanding, the town of Berlin is satisfied with how the Berlin Memorial Schools handle it. Again, fair, John?
Yeah, good. Most things.
I know, funny bit, some.
Cliff Laporte, Berlin. Here for two reasons. I'm a member of the FinCom in Berlin and also interested in education generally and the kids. My question is about this slide right here. You have indicated that the following school districts have successful school resource officer programs. They're listed. What I would like to know is, do these communities have SROs in both elementary schools and high schools? And secondly, how many SRO officers do you estimate they would have? I look at this, and with the exception perhaps of Clinton, these are very big school systems with considerable budgets and lots of kids.
Yeah, so it's my understanding that the schools listed here have one school resource officer who has primary responsibility in the high schools, and then they still oversee the other schools. I'm from Northborough. I know he spends, Detective Sullivan, he spends the majority of his time at Algonquin, and then he goes and does the Alice drills, et cetera, at the other schools. So similar to how we have it set up, or how we would have it set up.
Maybe.
Thanks. Okay, so my follow-up question is, an SRO who is trained for high school students and then works in elementary schools as well would have to be a pretty remarkable human being, because those are two very different school populations. And I mean, perhaps there are people who are that skilled, but I wonder if they should have different skill sets. I guess that's my question.
Yeah, so that's the I guess that's just the nature of our profession, is we have to have that tool, or we have to have that tool bag that has all those different skills in it. And the school resource officer is no different. It's ultimately, we're looking for temperament. They have to have the right temperament and the drive to be in.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Karen McGay. I'm also from the Finance Committee, but in Boylston. I have a couple of questions. I guess a comment first. I find it a little disappointing that we feel we need one in our elementary school when Berlin doesn't feel like they do. I feel like our town is,
We'll answer that.
Okay. But one other quick question, which is, when you split the time 75%, 25%, is that full 8-hour day?
Yeah, so they'll be there for their 40 hours a week. They would be assigned to the schools.
So, I mean, would there potentially not need to be any students in the school as part of that time?
So because the schools have left for the day, or because the schools are on vacation, et cetera. Well, I guess.
They're not usually there for 8 full hours, right? right?
Yes, but but the, Tohoto, school traffic, et cetera, starts about 6:45, 7 o'clock. And then BES dismissal is about 3:30. So there's overlap. The officer still has to check up on it, on the, daily activity logs. So there is prep work the officer has to do before he enters the school. So it's reading through the previous logs, shift history, what happened, where other calls happened.
I'm not sure whether Greg was kind of trying to get at this, but so in the summer, are we paying this person? Are they working for the town? Like what?
Yeah, so on vacations and, so like school vacations and then summertime, then you go back to the police department and they just fall into a designated shift, for patrol.
So then the cost of this person be more than the 200,000 that you put up there? Because that was said for 10 months.
No, so it's approximately 10 months they'd be working for the, school. And then for the other 2 months, they'd be going to the police department. So it would be shared expense between the district and the police department.
Would like to hear, yeah, the answers.
Well, first I'll go to Cliff real quick and say, a different set of skill sets. That would mean, could we send our 24-year-old good police officer to Gates Pond Road to your house? Or do I have to come because I'm out to pasture? We're police officers first and foremost. So you have to have the skills. It isn't an age thing. It's a highly trained position, like our firearms instructor, our drug investigator, our sexual abuse people are all highly trained in special fields. But first and foremost, we are police officers. We can give it the name or give it the title. They're there to serve the community. The community they're going to specialize in is the school district and the children. And there's a lot of vagueness and different things. And I've worked with each one of those school resources. Recently working with the Clinton one, and he reached out to me, Paul, and said, you know, Goody, what's this situation up at Tohoto? And everything like that. I said, who's the officer there? I said, we don't have one. And he was shocked. And we've always done it behind the scenes with John and his great staff working together. But he has other responsibilities as the chief now and running the department and things. So we don't have a specialized person here to work closely with those other ones. So many things came up. They were all over the place. Most school districts, there again, it's a police officer. They can still fill in shifts. They can work Sunday night. They can work Christmas when another officer wants to take the day off. In the summertime, they go to regular patrol. They go to a thing called admin schedule, unlike other officers. But they're first and foremost police officers, right, Chief? You know, and he's not getting into really the minutia of that. So they're 24/7. And when you answer the first part about it's not going to be Rambo, I've stood on this stage every year when we do the safety talks with all the staff, do our training in cooperation with Boylston. I'm not Rambo, but I assure them Rambo's coming through the door. And a couple of times we've introduced them to those police officers that are highly trained in that field. I'm the liaison, the spokesperson, and I work with them. As far as Berlin, we're in a unique situation. We're a small community. Officer Baum started the program years ago with the DARE programs. We introduced to him, and he was our school resource officer before it was a mandated thing under Governor Patrick that every school district had to have one designated under a reform law. And I picked up after that under Chief Galvin. We call it community service officer, working with the seniors, outreach programs and things like that. We modify it based on our population, our budget. And I don't see parents here. I see most of what I call the bean counters and the people that are responsible for running the town. And that's your job. And we do it in a way that I'm able to be there, not there, and back and forth. And through the grace of Chief Shartner and the rest of the department, it's flexible. It's a lot of work. And a lot of it's not counted or quantified. I don't go on to social media and tell you what I did. I mean, an average day for me is to pull up first thing in the morning after going to the station and being a police officer and checking the town real quick and checking with the other guys, pulling in, seeing the bus. Hey, how you doing? Bus driver's going to tell me problems, visibility, plowing, road rage, or anything like that, and take that, write that down, carry it in, check with the janitor going in, check in with the cafeteria, the front staff, all the teachers, go over stuff with the principal, answer some minor questions, because relatively very small. I'm not going to scare you. Still the safest place in the world, US public schools, but we have prevention programs in place. Checking with the teachers, and there's a lot of behind the scenes things, custody issues, probate issues, divorce things, security issues, building security issues. I'm not going to stand here and say that it's, a war zone, but we're constantly maintaining safety for the parents. Then it's outside real quick with John, if I have the time, drop off, meet parents. Hey, your sticker, your tire, your plate light, all stuff, prevention. Hi kids, how you doing? Holding a bag that's not, stuck in the door, not talking and answering residents' questions that see me there about problems they're having. As John says, let the line go, Sergeant Goody, stop talking. Kids get in, talk to the staff. Once again, there's just hundreds of things that happen that I don't write down in a chart for Chief Sharpner and we throw it on social media and he can report back to the selectmen. It's prevention. And behind the scenes, reaching out to Carol and the staff and reaching out to John quite often in his offices, talking what's going on. At the high school level, it's a little more involved. Electronics, cyberbullying. There's so much that goes on that these kids are potential victims to, internal problems. I get phone calls at home from parents, ties that I've made with college kids having problems. I reach out to other police agencies to assist them. That doesn't go in the town report. We just call it police info because it's private. We have a memorandum of understanding. Internal staff problems. You have a large population of employees that have everyday life issues, and we work with them on that to make it a better environment. I could go on and on, but we're in a unique position in Boylston, or rather Berlin, that we can do both. And I think what a board member said a couple of weeks ago when they were talking about, well, we have one by de facto. I got to tell you, I sat in the audience going, yeah, de facto. All right, that was a slap in the face. I do it because it's a job we do, and I do it for the parents and the students, and I work very close with John and his staff. And all these other agencies do the same thing. It's just, we're lucky and we're unique that you don't have anybody in this position. I'm really surprised. So if that answers a little bit about that, so that's what it is. But it's a great program. But once again, it's a police officer, and they have specialized training.
Peg Stone, Select Board member of Berlin. Carol, a question for you. How soon do you want this? Is this fiscal year or next fiscal year?
We were looking for it in the budget for this coming fiscal year, but John can talk a little bit about the training involved. That person probably would not come in till mid-year because by the time he goes out to look for this person, we interview, the person's hired, and then goes out for that very specific additional training that they would need to have to come forward. So mid-year of next year.
Chief, for you mentioned training, or Carol, I think that you had mentioned additional training. When is that training going to occur? Would it be during the school year, which would be time away from the SRO, or would it be in the summer?
No, so I would have put the officer in the school until all the training was completed. That's depending on when the training's available.
But what about additional follow-on training? I can't imagine it's a one and done.
No, so the ongoing in-service training would be during the school year.
Can I step in? All the SRO training is January, Christmas break, February break, and April break. And then the last day of school, Sergeant Goulding's gone for 3 days.
3 days right away. The training works around the school schedule. The Massachusetts Criminal Justice Training Council developed training that works around. So when February vacation, I have to go to a class. Summer vacation, there's extra classes going on, or I'm just scheduling. They make special in-service training that all police officers have to do, and they do a school resource officer program. So you're working around things like that.
More questions, and then I'll stop hogging. I didn't have a chance to read the memorandum of understanding, but will the community be involved in the interview process for this position from both Berlin and Boylston?
We would be, there'd be, of course, room for feedback. Ultimately, the person's serving as a police officer, I would involve the superintendent, certainly in on the process, but as Sergeant Gould pointed out, they're still a police officer after we give it consideration, and then we move on from there.
And last question, what have you done to search for grants to pay for this officer?
As of now, I don't know of any available grants that are open. So there's the COPS grant should be coming out that gives municipalities funding to hire police officers. I don't necessarily know if we meet those standards. I'm on the officer grant research weekly, checking out what grants I can apply for. If there's a grant out there, sure, I'll apply for it.
We often apply for these kinds of grants if they're available, for sure. The challenge with the grants in the long term is that we don't necessarily get them for the following year, or they're only good for a certain period of time. And so having somebody already in the budget, and we do this with teaching staff as well, we know that we're assured we have them. If we go totally into the grant mode, if we lose the grant, we lose the officer. That's the risk of that. But we always are sharing grants across the board, sending them to each other. So we could certainly look into that.
This last year, I think there were only 4 or 5 communities in Massachusetts that were successful in getting that COPS grant. So it's a 5-year program. Year 1, the program pays for 75% of the officer's salary. Year 2 is 50. Year 3 is 25, and 4 and 5. It's fully in the municipality. But they were all large agencies. I don't recall seeing any agencies of our size, so I don't know if you have to meet that specific criteria. But last year it wasn't something I was looking at. Well, again, this year is probably gonna be different.
I just have 3 quick comments. I'm a parent of 8 years in the district, and I've been on the PTO for 7 years at Tohoto and BES. So kind of have some firsthand knowledge. Also, one of my daughters is a graduate of the DARE in 5th grade at a different district. And I know this may be kind of coincidence, but they had 32 students, and of just keeping in touch with them, probably more than half have diverted away from substance abuse and trying it. And I don't know if it was through scare tactics, but they love their DARE officer, who is a parent of children here from another district. So I just wanted to give a thumbs up for DARE if it can get to BES over the years, if there's time. Second, I just wanted to commend Sergeant Goody volunteering. I've witnessed Tara and I are on PTO, and we volunteer a lot of events at the school. And I'm just so impressed when the kids come up to you. You're just walking through the cafeteria and they're like, hey, Sergeant Goody, Sergeant Goody. So those are Berlin kids who Boylston kids haven't met really, and some of the ones kids like, who's that? Who's that? They're like, oh, that's our DARE officer from BMS. So I just wanted to let you know that.
And I will tell you, when you instill somebody in the district here in a high school, middle school, which once again needs more attention, I'm never downplaying the first grader that I open a yogurt for at lunch. Those Go-Gurts, the stress, and you're struggling and it's going to get on the uniform. Those children 20 years from now have reached out for me or talked to me. There was a student getting picked up in the parking lot, and we handled the civil probate situation with that family, and they were comfortable with this. That's the first and foremost thing. You can do it here. And John was doing it years ago with me, and being a sergeant and patrolman the best he could, juggling it. So you've been spoiled as a community that you've had the benefit of a lot of volunteer. And I say that I understand the fiscal responsibility of the finance committee and the elected officials, but you're a parent. And the cost, if I put a slip in for everything I do, first of all, I'm looking at that, and that's better paying than I'm getting in Berlin. So I'm going to talk to John afterwards on that first slide. Little plug to you up there. But the cost factor, it's a cost, all right? And you will have somebody here, whoever he picks, he or she. I work closely with the female in Bolton and Neshoba, split by 3 towns. And I take a lesson from her of cooperation. There isn't anything they don't do in that district. They don't involve Stowe and Lancaster with the Bolton School Resource Officer. Similar geographic with 3 towns. We're Berlin. We have Berlin students here. We have continuity, but the school sits in Bolton, so they are the primary person. But she works in concert with Lancaster and Stowe to be efficient, as I do with the Assabet School Resource Officer and there's one in every school in Cliff and Marlboro, he or she reaches out to me, and that's how it works. But you will have that same result. And when you're looking at numbers and finances, is it worth it? Is not worth it? That same relationship or that hi or hello may save a life when they're in a situation where it's friendly and receptive. And I'm very honest with them about, I am a police officer, I have laws to enforce, we have discretion, but if we can prevent something from happening, and that's part of the DARE program that I've showed to John, and he took the lead, no pun intended with lead, and started something on his own years ago when you didn't have anything. And I shared with him and DARE has changed. It's not drug abuse resistance education. It's decide, assess, respond, and evaluate. And you have to ask yourself tonight, you know, having a police officer assigned to the schools in Boylston, working in conjunction for safety and prevention, was it right decision? You know, assess, respond, and evaluate. It's, at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do. But I understand the fiscal responsibility. So in violation of some of our contracts in the union, I do volunteer once in a while to show up at the schools and do things. But I hope, thank you as a parent. I'd like to hear the parents talk. If you are the parents, you are the taxpayers, you are the community, and you're the most involved. But I respect the elected officials that have taken the responsibility to balance the budget too. So you have to be open in your discussion.
So, Goody and I have talked about this several times. It's a remarkable thing when, so I oversaw the schools as the liaison officer for a number of years. And, it's amazing the connections you make with kids and how you can talk them down. I received numerous phone calls while I was off duty. It was always when the on-duty officer would call, it was always one of your kids is out of control, meaning usually it was a Parento kid, and they'd throw it on speakerphone, and I talked to them on the phone, and it was just, I mean, you can just flip it, because it's not just some nameless cop now. Now they're talking to someone that they actually have a personal connection with. I saw a few weeks ago, I responded out to a call. Family was going through some difficult times, and I could hear the argument with the police from the outside. As soon as I walked in, parents go, "Oh, thank God, it's Officer John." And the kid put his head down and goes, "Oh crap, it's Officer John." It was like, hey, obviously for privacy, I won't use the name, but it was, hey, come outside, let's talk about what's going on. Like, dude, you can't do that. It was just a situation that more likely than not was going to end in a use of force thing, was able to quickly get overturned because of that personal connection we had. And then I'll ask you, this is what the goal of the school resource officer is building those relationships that are ongoing.
I do want to add to what you both are saying too. I don't think we could have imagined this more than 5 years ago, or maybe a little bit longer. This opportunity is a result of the groundwork that's been done with our administrators, with our police departments and our fire departments too, through these past number of years. We have come together in a partnership. The officers are very familiar coming into the schools. They're very comfortable. We call each other all the time. Some of the incidents that you know, as parents, we've all been involved in, critical incidents. We're on the phone with each other. We know each other extremely well. We know how to get in touch, even if we hear something going on. These are the people that I would put my own children and grandchildren in their hands. It's community policing. It's a different kind of scene, and we are unique here. And these individuals reflect who we are, just as we reflect as educators who we are in the community. These officers reflect who we are as well in the community. And that's why you have folks like John and Eric and Goody here. There are people.
A couple of quick questions. I'm Everett Crossland, a parent of a first grader at BES. And just one first question. So where's the budget for this coming from? Is this going to come from the school budget at all?
Yeah, it would go into the school budget for the 10 months, right? Yes.
And also, I understand you're saying presence doesn't look like Rambo. Can you describe that a little bit more? What is the officer carrying or wearing a vest? What does that look like?
Yeah, the uniform would be ultimately what I decide. I gotta be honest with you, it would probably just be it would be just a regular uniform. But my comment about the Rambos, I talk to people and they think that, they think of, essentially like a special forces officer who's just, so tactical and just ready to stop any threat. And that's not it. It's a patrol officer in the school who's capable of handling all the situations, not just there for tactics. So that was a Rambo comment. More likely than not, it would probably be just be a regular police uniform. Some school resource officers, if they're in a polo with their gun belt. It just I'm open for feedback if we get that.
Eventually with a gun.
It would 100% be with fire.
Yeah. So, as a parent of an elementary school student, and exposure to somebody with a gun, even in a police uniform, in this town seems out of context to me. And then the other question on the elementary school front, I understand the preventive policing and certainly appreciate that and the relationship, community-based policing. Are there incidents or has there been a trend upwards in incidents at the elementary school where you've seen a need for heavier presence or police presence at the elementary school, statistically speaking?
No, so the elementary school, the goal there is to begin those relationships, start building those positive relationships, getting the kids familiar with the police officer, and that role it's more be an advocate for families, helping them along with it. The firearm, I've had this conversation a lot with parents as I was in the schools a lot. That's the beginning of education. Not asking you whether your firearm's in the house or not, but eventually your child is going to be in someone's home that has a firearm. It's starting that education part. Every time I walk, especially the elementary school, if they're in kindergarten, first, second grade, they never look at me. They're always looking at everything on my tool belt. So when I used to teach, even for the fifth graders, when I used to teach a program there, it was, all right, first things first, what are we going to talk about my belt today? Get the curiosity out there, and then let's move on.
So, John, yes, there is an uptick. Threats, cyber threats, phone-in threats. It's a different world in 2024. There's a lot more activity and threats locally and around us. We practice for this and we're prepared. If you were in first grade, or your child was, you'd be introduced to me through the teacher, or you'd meet me at the school open house or before. We meet in preschool and kindergarten, John, and I talk to the prospective students, usually when they're coming in to sign in and move into Berlin, because they're checking their address to make sure that they're actually from the district, because we're such a valuable high learning district. They want to come here. So we make sure they're not sneaking in, and we check their address, and I meet them and have a one-on-one conversation what we do. There isn't a student in BMS that doesn't know what the most important part of my uniform is. And you know what that is? What do you think it is? I'm going to ask you. Right here. It's my pen. I'm constantly talking to them about that. And when I get a new student that's out of district or formerly homeschooled, and there's the fascination like I had, and they're looking at my duty belt, which we talk about first, second, third grade, about the tools, but we draw away from this whole object. We do a safety thing about it because they're going to be exposed, like the chief said, about what do you think my gun is made of? And that's part of the conversation, metal, aluminum, it's almost all plastic. And that goes into a whole 40-minute lesson about how dangerous even toy or replicas are that you don't know, and to teach them to call 911 and they'll never get in trouble. And this is a whole safety thing we do with them. But every student knows this is the most important part of my uniform. And when I walk into BMS, or if I come up here, I jump into the lesson plan and talk about, oh yeah, I gotta do home. I go to police school next week. I still take tests. In fact, he sent me something, he was missing something, one of my tests. And I shared that with the kids. Yeah, Chief Shartner said I didn't complete something. I have to study, do homework, my pen. What does your pen do? It just wrote in the log, Sergeant Goody was at the first grade classroom helping hand out things and talk about safety, so that 3 months from now, they can look at my homework and say, Sergeant Goody, there was an incident down by the school. Were you at the school? Yes, I was. All right, we see you were on duty in the log. Look at your homework. My homework says I was there from 8:30 to 11 o'clock. What did I observe or like that? And so the kids remember that. So when I see a new student, I love when I can say, hey kids, what's the most important part of my uniform? Your pen. And they're proud. And I always tell them I only hear hands. They can't shout out. So we demystify it, but we point out how dangerous it is. And I can't tell the difference. I'm not the Rambo gun expert between a real one and a toy one. And I'm going to secure it and bring in one of our experts, and no one's going to get hurt. And I'm going to write it down with my pen, what happened, and we'll have a story and everybody be safe. So I hope I got both. There's a higher rate of incident. A lot of it doesn't make the press. A lot of it's handled internally with the principals, the school resource officer, and the chiefs. And then the demystifying the tools so they're comfortable. But as a parent, I truly expect that question. And I sit down with people privately when John recommends it to me and talk about what I do. So I hope that answered that, because that's a personal one for me too.
Hi, Julie Malloy. I'm on the Berlin FinCom, so I just want a clarification since the budget came up again. You said that it was roughly 63K. Is that just salary, or is that also paying for all the other expenses to support the officer?
Yeah, so that's the 10-month period, and the remainder would be following into the police department.
Yeah, but when you showed your other slides, you showed a whole bunch of expenses.
Yeah, so
So and that's much higher than,
Yeah, I'm not sure that's true.
the numbers don't really match up.
So the salary range for a Boylston police officer is about $30.23 to $35.97. The benefits, health insurance, et cetera. There's an educational incentive. So if you have an associate's degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, you get between that $3,000 and $12,000. The initial uniform purchase, that the one-time purchase from the collective bargaining agreement is $1,700. Going on every other year after that, it's $1,500. There's an initial department purchase that the department, so Boylston Police Department, would have to provide the officer: jackets, leather gear, et cetera. That's approximately $7,000. The vehicle and equipment, obviously, that's a one-time purchase. The mobile radio to go into the vehicle, that's a one-time purchase. The miscellaneous office equipment, that just, like I said, the outfit, the office.
Actually, I'm kind of confused because the vehicle usually has to be replaced.
So
So
we have,
say one-time purchase will eventually.
so it's the initial purchase. So we usually get 5 years out of a cruiser. So every 5 years, yes, you would have to count on it.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
All right, I get what you're asking. So the 63,000 is the piece that would be allocated to the schools. Town of Boylston, since the officer will be reporting into John, will be a Boylston police officer, the town would be paying for certain expenses on here. I believe including the uniform, we talked about the vehicle, the radio, so all that stuff. So that 63,000, that's the piece that's gonna get allocated annually to the school. So what would be in the Berlin budget would be the 17,000, right?
Right, about 16, 17,000, right? We were factoring how many students we,
So
right,
it would be whatever percent on those percentages
right.
of your 47,000.
Okay, so
Berlin's percentage.
so having that broken out more clearly would be really great, because it's a bit muddled right now, the way that slide is.
No, we absolutely will for the schools, no doubt.
Hi, I'm Steve Real. I don't have a child there anymore. He graduated a couple of years ago. Recently retired police officer. I was one of those towns, Westboro. The high school's about 1,200 students, so it's a little bit bigger, 7 schools total. We have one resource officer in the whole town. Could use 3 or 4 easily. The ends of, I understand your concern, sir. Our resource officer is plain clothes, 100%. We tried it years ago with the uniform. Your concern came up with the students and parents. He went to plain clothes. You don't even know he's armed. Don't even know. He's got a radio. He's got his own office there. He's got an unmarked car. So that works out fine. What we haven't talked about, all those programs are great we talked about and these gentlemen talked about. What we haven't talked about, and people don't want to face reality, is active shooters, folks. It can happen anywhere. Don't ever say it can't happen in my backyard. It can happen. Most critical thing we can have is response time. To have an officer in this school is the most important thing you can have when you have an armed intruder. Okay, and she talked about mental health. That's a real issue. Before I retired, that was a real issue, real issue. So don't say, I don't want him in there, or I don't want her in there. It's critical to have somebody in this school. If my son was here still, I'd be pushing for this. The most important thing is response time, to have that officer here. The high school principal actually has a radio directly on our frequency, police frequency. If something happens, he calls. Usually the school resource officer, most of his time is in the high school. And he floats around to the elementary school. He can only be in so many places at one time. I'm 100% support of this, of those issues. It can happen, folks. And to say, nah, we don't want it and something happens, how are we going to feel as parents? How are we going to feel? I leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you to the retired officer. It's an important point. And, I'm Mary Porter. I'm from Berlin. I do wear a finance committee hat. And I wear a few other hats around town. But let me just go back to what he said about the seriousness of this and a couple of comments on that. The first one is Uvalde. And I don't think that, my heart goes out to parents, children, to the teachers in the rooms, to everybody in the schools with what we have going on in our society right now. But do not assume that an armed resource officer in the school is going to guarantee safety. And we know that from our history. The whole thing is a tragedy. So, when a very wise person said to me once, what does fear mean? False evidence appearing real. Okay, so what can we do? And Chief Annunziata, I don't want to get you in trouble because you're over that age of 12. And, I don't want to, get you into any kind of hot water. But one of the things that I'm hearing here tonight, and I've been hearing all along, and I'm active in the community, I care deeply about these communities. I don't have any kids. I want our children in these towns to be educated, involved citizens when they become adults. And I want to make sure that we do that and we deliver for them. So what you have in these 2 towns in Berlin, we have pretty active community policing tradition that goes back decades and decades. And, Chief, I don't want to disparage anything going on, but I think what I'm hearing is that in Boylston, we'd like more of that. And so the overarching issue that we want to achieve is this safety and this communication in our communities. The question is, how do we get there? And then I asked the question, how do we get here tonight? And as I understand what's been the information given out to the public is the school committee initiated a drive to get a school resource officer in our school district. Okay, and appropriately, our district superintendent Costello responded. The schools in question are in the town of Boylston. So Chief Annunziata is the chief person. Those 2 people are the decision makers. I like to read the law. So I have here a copy of what Massachusetts passed that defines what is a school resource officer. It's a defined legal term. It's under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 71, Section 37P. And what it says is this is done at the discretion in a regional school district of the district superintendent, right here, Superintendent Costello, in conversation with the chief in the town where the school's located, and with appropriations from the town. So let me put on my finance committee hat here. Okay, so So we'd like to see more community policing around these two schools, Tohoto, Boylston Elementary. But when I look at town appropriations, we had an extremely challenging budget season last year. Okay? And we got through it and we got to fund pretty much what the schools had asked for. We can't do that again this year. So if we elect to put funding behind school resource officer this year, we're going to have to ask the school districts to take that money out of something else in the school budget. Because guess what? The fact that you're only putting part of those expenses in the school budget, it doesn't mean that it just goes away or there's some magic wand. The towns pay for it. And in these two towns, it's residential real estate. It's your tax bill. Okay? Now, it's an initiative that's worth it. Our safety, our children, our education are extremely important. In the town of Berlin, and I don't think Boylston's very different, it's half of our budget. And I support it. The question is, I want us to use our money wisely because it's not an infinite supply. Let's think about how to do this rationally. Let's think about, are we putting the cart in front of the horse and saying, oh, I've got a solution for everything? Why don't we think about something else that we can do? And by the way, when I look, Officer Goulding and Chief Shartner know me well. Chief, you and I are not as well acquainted, but Officer Goulding just tonight threw his body out in front, a speed bump, for me. He doesn't just work the schools, he works the entire community, right? And my challenge to all of us is to broaden your thoughts about how to achieve, what are the goals and how do we achieve them? What are the different alternatives? And continue to study this question until we're really satisfied that we're doing the best thing for these two small towns. Because I don't think, my opinion, member of the finance committee, a citizen who's very engaged at many levels, and a taxpayer here, I don't think it's the best route for us to go. I want us to stay in this conversation, but I don't want the conversation to stop here. And again, I grew up, I went to school without, of course, when I went to school, we had these drills where we had to dive under our desks because somebody was going to drop a nuclear bomb on us. But that never happened. And that's different today. Bad things do happen. So let's come together and try to do the right thing with this. And don't assume we have only one answer to how to tackle this. What am I forgetting? I don't know. I'll probably talk more if I forgot something. I'm always talking. Thank you, John.
Yes, so just a few takeaways I have. So with research pertaining to active shooters, it's kind of suggestive. There's no data out there that goes, hey, Mary, I heard you shot up this school. Were you going to shoot up any other schools? Well, actually, I was going to shoot up this school. They had a school resource officer, so I went to this school. You know what I mean? So it's just suggestive. And so I recently attended a active shooter tabletop exercise with Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center Fellowship. So it's a group of doctors from around the world that research active shooter situations and disasters and critique it and say, what could we have done better? So I can't speak for Uvalde or any of the other shootings, but what I can say is that the program Massachusetts is rolling out with the BIDMC disaster medicine is going to make Massachusetts the most superior law enforcement agency in the United States to handle this. So I don't know, I am reading the DOJ notes on Uvalde and the other shootings, but what I can tell you is that's not how Massachusetts is trained. I've never been in an active shooter situation myself. I would like to think I would react a certain way, but until you're in the situation, you have no idea. But I can tell you, once this alert training is rolled out, Texas used to be the top dog. Massachusetts will be the most superior law enforcement agency to handle these situations.
Have possession of the mic. First of all, I want to thank Superintendent Costello, you, Chief, Berlin officers, and anyone else in the room, school committee, for doing this presentation and bringing this topic to the community. It is a topic that affects the community a great deal, perhaps more than most things that I'm going to make decisions about. I think Officer Goody, if I may be so informal, is an outstanding spokesperson for the role that you're speaking about. And I only wish that more parents were here to have heard it. Not only the whole presentation, but to hear the passion of someone who does the work every day. Yeah, I'm on the FinCom and I'm going to have to respond financially, but I also am a parent of adult children, a 38-year public school educator, 20 years of principal, and a 6-year member of the school committee. So I have interest in schools and kids. Perhaps you need to do more outreach to parents because it would really be important to not only engage them, but to get their full support because they will be attending town meeting and they will have to make decisions about the town's finances and particularly about the school budget. And they may hear a recommendation from a FinCom, let's say, that does not support it. And so they would have to think about that and what they can do or should do. So thank you. And I encourage you to continue the communication and have a great spokesperson on hand.
Thank you, Cliff. And I do think that, I mean, this is one effort that we're trying to make to bring forward, as I said earlier, this is a discussion, this is a conversation, this is information gathering for the public who is here, also the public who is at home, who may be watching this as well. We've reached out to this many folks, many of whom are really on our boards and committees. So we do want to try to reach out more to parents. So we're hoping we're doing that in this way. But I mean, I think I'm in the schools all the time for coffee chats and any other kinds of events. And I'm happy to have those conversations and reach parents that way, PTO meetings, right? PTO folks know that. So we will continue that conversation. And just like anything else, hopefully that what we want to put forward, we will have that information available so that as many people, the parents in particular, that we can reach by the time we get to town meeting are informed about this. So thank you for those suggestions too.
I am a parent, actually, and I've listened through all of this, and we're actually new to Boylston. We just moved in last year. I have a high schooler and an elementary school student, and, I recall very vividly when my oldest child was 8 years old, when the first shooting happened in Connecticut, when Adam Lanza went and killed all these little kids. I couldn't sleep for a week. I would go drop off my kid at school, watch the windows, and I almost asked the teacher to move my kid to, it was just very traumatizing. And I'm listening about the finances and I'm very sympathetic, but to me, it's just so worthwhile. If it takes, all of this, if it saves one kid's life, it was worth the expense. And so to me, if we can y'all finance people, because I spent 10 years in Oklahoma, and one of the reasons we moved from Oklahoma, because of the open carry. You can walk into a gun store and you can have 10 years worth of being in a mental institution. They don't care. You can buy your guns. Everybody has guns. So if it takes a school resource officer, if they deter one kid from deciding that they're going to do something really stupid, to me, it's worthwhile the expense. And, we can look into maybe cutting expenses or whatever. We're paying enough taxes, but that takes priority over other things. That's just my take as a parent. So I'm sorry. It's a bit emotional.
So one of my previous agencies, and a very well-established school resource officer program, and the officer was often made fun of for, not really doing much. And until I shadowed him. And the amount of information that flowed to him that went around the principals and the administrators directly to the school resource officer, it was something as significant as like, hey, like you might want to take a look at little Johnny, just, he's not right. He's not normal. He hasn't been like this for a while. So just something's not right. And it's that encounter the police officer has with him that's different than the school. That's different than your neighbor, your friend's family. It's just different. And again, going back to the data, there's no data to capture. Did that stop self-harm or harming other people? Did that stop someone going to drugs? There's no data to capture that. But I've worked with police departments that have a very successful school resource officer program. I'm a product of it. I know that.
Gary Porter again. I told you, I threatened I'd probably talk some more. This parent behind me, I want to say my heart goes out to the parents, to the students, to everybody that's in these classrooms in this current environment. And it isn't all about money. I want to point out that Superintendent Costello mentioned, let's see if I got it right. How much money are we spending on the mental health professionals at the schools?
Right, and including some services that we provide, $730,000 this year.
Okay. That kind of spend I can get behind when I think about my role on the, finances of the town, my obligations to the taxpayers, as well as myself. Because I think if you look at the history of what's gone on, the incidents in the school, there's very often been someone connected with the school, a student who has a mental health issue. And so when I speak about cost, it's about before we spend the money, make sure we're doing it effectively. And how can we're small, how can we do this in a better way? That's my point. It's not to not spend money. And I think we want to keep an eye on the mental health aspect of this. I think it's really critical.
Many kids with mental health issues do not come forward, and these are potentially those that end up doing something stupid because they don't feel comfortable going and talking to a counselor, or they don't have access to counseling. And or if you go back at the history of, many did have mental health issues, but many did not raise red flags at all. Just out of the blue, they decided that they were going to bring a gun to school and start shooting up people. So while I agree that proper mental, I was reading an article today about, it was actually WPI a few years back. They had 7 kids who committed suicide on campus. It was one of the worst, and they had, I presume, mental health resources, and just couldn't figure out what was going on. And so when a kid snaps and decide that, you know what, I'm just going to grab my dad's gun and go into school today, what's going to matter. And I understand what you said about Uvalde. I mean, it was just one individual who did not do what they were supposed to do. But the time to response to neutralizing the threat could make the difference between 10 kids dying or 20 kids dying. So, or nobody dying. So to me, having somebody in there where my kid is coming and attending makes a whole lot of difference. And it means cutting costs and other aspects of the school budget. It's totally worth it. That's just,
So tell us where to cut.
Cafeteria.
Hi, Jessica Crossland. I am married to this guy, so we have the same first grader. I just wanted to say I appreciate hearing that the DARE program has improved since the early 90s when I went through it, because it wasn't a great program back then. But I'm just curious. So we just got a health teacher in the elementary school who presumably is addressing healthy relationships, bullying, peer pressure, drug use, a lot of the stuff that a SRO would talk about with the younger kids. So I'm curious why we are not waiting to see how this health teacher is approaching similar crossover topics, and why we would use a police officer as an assembly or a special program, why we feel like we need an entire, let's say, a day. It's going to be a bit more if it's 25% of the week, but let's just say a day out of the week that we have an officer in the school. That's my first question. My second comment is, I come from a social work background. I wholeheartedly believe in social work in schools. I'm curious, you know, we have adjustment counselors and other people. I'm curious why we didn't kind of look at the social work case management person for this kind of role, who's going to tie in all those loose ends, who's going to communicate with the community members, with the family, with the school, with the therapist, whoever, to wrap around services for these kids. I don't necessarily agree that a kid in trouble is going to turn to a police officer as opposed to a social worker, a teacher, a counselor, a principal. And also, you know, we're not going to stop school shootings. We're just not. And having a police officer split between 3 schools, any kid who's on the brink of, you know, a collapse is going to choose the day that their officer is not in their school to do something. I mean, it's heart-wrenching as a parent to have to think about this as our lives, but it's a fact. So I understand the response time comment. I get that. You're not going to stop it, but maybe it'll be faster. I get why an SRO in the high school is important and reaching out to the middle school is important. I don't quite see $16,000 from the school budget for the elementary school is important. I also think we fought tooth and nail to get, they're called the teachers' aides in the kindergarten classrooms this year, and half the town didn't want to pay for that. We still have a roof that is leaking in the elementary school, that the kids can't use the library on rainy days. I mean, there are so many things that we need to address in the elementary school that is aging and we're not keeping on top of, and yet we are pushing this additional resource in that personally, I don't think it merits the need.
Yeah, so the school resource officer is not gonna be going in and taking over what another teacher is teaching. They have their own set of curriculum that they teach. So when I taught lead for the 5th graders, it was alcohol and tobacco use and how that affects the brain, specifically the developing brain. It's all dependent on what their age group is and what's the variables for their what's the other? Yeah, so and again, it's to build the relationships for when they do come to Tohoto, that it's the relationships are already there. It's to deal with the out of school things, the parent issues, where you know you're going through custody battle. There's more that goes on at the elementary school outside that's still related to the elementary school during just normal business hours. That's just, and again, just to make it clear, this is just for Tohoto and Boylston Elementary School, not Berlin. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi.
Hi, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Megan Grill. I'm the chair of the school committee. Just about the budget. So the way the budget works for the schools is that the school committee actually sets the budget. We vote on it, and then it goes to town meeting. So we do take input from the finance committees, but the school's budget actually is set and voted on by the school committee. So just because if the town of Boylston decides they want to add an SRO, that does not mean that the school committee is going to decide to cut fixing the roof at BES or not adding a teacher or whatever else we need in the schools. At the end of the day, that goes to the school committee and then it goes to the town. And last year we had a huge, at least in Boylston, in Berlin as well, I believe, we had a huge turnout of parents and an overwhelming response that the towns wanted to move forward with the school's budget.
and again, it's I understand we're never going to stop the school shootings or active shooters in general, but the goal is to prevent. And the more resources you have, more likely you're going to have. I too would never have thought a kid would open up to a cop before they would open up regarding certain situations. than a teacher. I've seen it firsthand. I too was a non-believer. I've witnessed it. It's kind of, like I said, it's a remarkable thing.
Questions. The first is regarding student privacy. Can you talk a little bit about how that privacy is protected and are SROs bound by FERPA?
So police are not bound by HIPAA. However,
Sorry, I asked a guest about FERPA, not HIPAA.
oh, excuse me. What was it?
FERPA, Federal Education Right to Privacy Act.
I can answer that, John. In fairness to you, he hasn't gone through the specialized training, including firefighters that have been on detail in our school for recent situations for the pump that don't understand that. So I have to go over very strictly with them, the guidelines. It's 80 hours of in-service training every year. And a lot of that covers FERPA, which is federally overseen, information sharing, things like that. Very strict. It's not the Patriot Act. It's not the fear factor and like that. We are bound by confidentiality above and beyond regular law enforcement. And that's part of the memorandum of understanding to meet the guidelines of the school district. So there's a very strict rule of what we can share and not share. Frustrating sometimes because we could solve a lot of problems if we could share information. But we do meet the standards of FERPA.
So I do have the MOU in front of me. So on the MOU, pages 6, 7, and 8 discuss what information can be shared from the school to the police department, what can go from the police department to the school, and then outside ones too. But it's pretty strict.
Can you speak to the training that SROs go through with regard to mental health, disabilities, and positive behavioral supports?
Once again, advanced training. The academies have put a lot into mental health awareness training right now under the new post regulations that every officer, chief down, has to go through. But a school resource officer is mandated even more. We're lucky district partnership with Massachusetts Partnerships for Youth, constant ongoing staff, psychologists, teachers, administrators belong to this collaboration of teaching network that we're allowed as school resource officers to participate. I don't get any of the, what do you call those, CEUs and extra credits to get raises. I just go because it's mandated. So I can answer that. So it's advanced training. And I can answer to the mental health part of it too. But if you have another one.
Students working with students with disabilities.
Working with students with disabilities is no different than working with community members with disabilities. We're given extra training in autism and other things that we weren't taught years ago where there was many mistakes. So we work with children with disabilities to the level that we're allowed to. FERPA, all the privacy, things like that, as we would with any other student.
So to follow up on that, do you abide by behavioral intervention plans that school staff are required to abide by?
Yes, because there is, the principal can speak to several incidents where things happen. And I look at staff or even parents go, Sergeant Goody, you can do something? No. That's not my job. There was a situation a couple of months back where some 3rd and 4th graders are running out of the girls' room, and one of the boys had gone in there, 3rd grade, and the kids were screaming and like that. One of the girls screaming, Sergeant Goody, Sergeant. I said, whoa, get me a staff. This wasn't a public area where I would normally intervene as a police officer. There's a whole different standard of where I can go across line and not. But she reached out to me for help. She trusted me. She was comfortable with me from 1st grade on, and then shared that experience. But I get a staff member right away.
So you do abide by, if a student has a behavioral intervention plan in place, you do abide by that plan.
There is a plan in place, which is also very private. I'm well aware, as I don't want to speak to my specific family members. Let's just say I've sat in many IAP meetings. Am I saying it right? And things like that. All right, IAP, personally. So I'm well aware of those situations, and we do abide to those standards. Yes.
And the last question I have is, would an SRO report or take direction from a police supervisor, an administrator, both?
So it falls underneath the police department. That's spelled out in the MOU too. There are certain situations where the school resource officer must notify the principal before taking any action. And then there's room in there if there's immediate threat of public safety, et cetera, consult with the principal when reasonable too. If an arrest has been made, like I said, from 2020 to now, there's been 2 juvenile arrests. Neither one of them were a member of Boylston or Berlin. Neither one of them had any affiliation with the Hondo, the elementary school. They're isolated incidents. The preferred method written out in the MOU and just across Massachusetts, the preferred method when dealing with juveniles is to summons. Give court paperwork, show up here, but the MOU will answer will answer a lot of those questions.
Yeah, and I would say that it's very clear guidelines in that MOU around that partnership between the superintendent and the police department and with the principals as well of the school. I mean, there are certain things we're definitely working together on these issues in the school. So I think there's involves a lot of conversation with one another.
Carol.
There's 100% room for continued education across the state with police officers how to handle mental health situations. Unfortunately, there's just not a lot of state funding for it. But obviously, if we were successful in achieving this SRO, that would be one of the priorities.
There isn't a law enforcement retired active, I believe, that would never not support mental health training and awareness. We sit back, that's a topic conversation in stations going, why is money going here? Going, put it to mental health. Our job would be so much easier. We've always welcomed cooperation and working together with mental health people. And I look at the number thrown out of $700-something thousand with mental health training. So that's good for right here. The SRO in the law enforcement community connects it to after 2:30 in the afternoon, Mary, to Mondays, nights, and Saturdays and Sundays. If we're not working together, so the $63,000 tied into $700,000, you just reinforced your community safety and mental health training that much better, because that's no good without us, and we're no good without them. And we can't separate them. And I'm trying to touch like 3 different things. First of all, Uvalde, I read it all weekend long. I'm personally embarrassed. That's not Massachusetts. And I could have brought a lot of slides to show success rates for SROs and preventions. I didn't do that. I didn't feel I needed to. To the parent behind you, tragedy that we live with in law enforcement every day, Connecticut. But guess what? Your school and Berlin School were the same size. So when we say, well, they're big cities, those little new towns the same size as Berlin and Boylston. So it can happen anywhere. And back to Mary, well, Officer Goody was a human speed bump. Well, thank you for the accolades. And I have emails from former students here saying what a great job I did. But I can't be here all the time. And what he's asking you, and the parents are asking you, is you need a full-time school resource officer to fill in that void. We're all going to try to do the best we can. But at the end of the day, I can't be here all the time to be that speed bump. And to the parent back there, I can give you over 5,000 interactions that I've built in 41 years with a youth that reach out to me. I'm getting old, with marital problems, other problems, things like that, because there was good communication among good police officers that we're going to strive to get the best person in that position, working from pre-K all the way through high school and continuing through college. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about. And all the training helps. We have to work together. I reach out to your school psychologist, so they call this. We're working closer now than we ever have. But I can't do it all the time. And I'm one person. And this is a high school, middle school. I do it with our elementary people, helping parents cope with things and meeting the standards and the training and all those things. So at the end of the day, I know it's a money thing, but that money spent in collaboration works together wonderful.
If you jump on our Boylston Police Department website and start throwing on putting up this menu, I put up how the Boylston Police Department policy procedure on how to handle juveniles. To go with a few transgender or just a blanket LGBTQ. There's a few policies on it that are related to the school. If you have some downtime, I have to read up on some of those. Now that should kind of give you a guideline of where we are.
Back, Mary Porter back again. Just a comment, Officer Goulding, what I was trying to say earlier is that you and our police department do community policing writ large across. The question particular question is, do you need a full-time person physically present in these two schools at all times? Do you need that? And going back to that overarching goal, the safety education of our students, I don't think it's black and white. It is not social workers versus cops. It's bring it together. Question is, how much do you need? When do you need it? And then I want to return to the comment from Megan Grill, the chair of the school committee. The current school committee and actually the current district administration is a bit new. I've only been on Berlin's finance committee maybe 5-6 years, but there's a long tradition of negotiating around budget. It's a process. It's not an on-off switch. And my understanding of that process is it doesn't begin and end at the school committee. It's a back and forth iteration. And among other things, the towns take a vote ahead of town meeting. So we have a finance committee vote on the school budget. We have a select board vote on the school budget. We come together. We work really hard on setting priorities and getting things done, and have to understand that there's a time frame to some of these things, and you can start it now, but you might be finishing it a few years down the road. Here's the problem. The towns can't print money. We can't print money, right? So there's a certain revenue. We estimate the revenue. We estimate the expenses. It has to balance out. So yeah, if we had a perfect world and unlimited revenues, we could keep talking about this. We don't. We have to make some really hard choices. It's agonizing. We work really hard at it. Right now, the Berlin Finance Committee is meeting every Wednesday night. We do it from January through the end of March to try to resolve this. And I'm going to say it again, we had a really tough year. Last year, the school budgets passed with enormous increases, historically unknown increases in budgets, not because parents showed up, but because we had some special issues last year related to the pandemic, related to special education, and the town stepped up and supported the schools. We can't do that this year. Heads up, we cannot. So make your choices. Thanks.
Are there any other questions or comments around the school resource officer or concerns? I think that the important conversation here too is hearing different perspectives on this, and that's exactly why we wanted to bring you together tonight, from everything from safety and finances to the role to mental health and all of the things you're concerned about. I've been thinking here tonight, next steps that was mentioned, in addition to going around to the schools to talk with parents and be available. I think that talking with the school committee, talking with our administrators who are in the audience tonight and the officers, that is what we'll talk about after this informational piece tonight. What are we hearing and what do we need to do, to answer more questions, to help you make an informed decision as you go forward into town meeting with this, or we don't. I think that's going to be an important conversation internally as well as with the towns. Go ahead.
Hi. Can you hear me now? So my question is kind of in this slide and the one before it. And it's neither for or against the SRO. It's only a question because we're a combined district between two towns. And it doesn't seem like $60,000 a year is going to be enough to fund that officer. In fact, when the question was asked when the officer would start, he said it wouldn't be in the budget until probably halfway through the year next year, because you have to get this officer trained and up to speed. So what you're effectively saying is that the residents of Boylston are going to fund the training and all the supporting financing that goes into this officer that's going to benefit both communities. So I think there needs to be some more discussion around how and where the funding is coming from, whose budget a lot of this is coming out of. Because
And I
I don't
think I
think
heard-
that
yeah.
I don't think the RAP rate that's being used there reflects the $75,000 car, the gas, the upkeep of that car and everything. It just seems like it's basically his pay rate plus benefits with no other RAP rate.
Right, and that's the part that we would incur as a district, as a school district, right? But to your point, yep, the rest would be absorbed through the town of Boylston. Exactly, yeah. Yeah. It would give you another officer.
Yeah.
Right, but we're paying 100% of the fringe benefits fringe on that officer. The school's not bearing any of that burden. So that $100,000, the $75,000 car is not reflecting that $63,000.
Jimmy, did you want to add to that?
I know what Greg's coming from. I agree. I believe vehicle equipment, mobile radio, and miscellaneous, initial health, and the benefits package should be split.
Yeah.
Based on the 75-25 time split, then based on whatever the proration is.
Correct. So chief,
So
whatever
the benefits
whatever your
are-
budget's gonna go up for, excuse me, whatever your budget's gonna go up for the entire year to fund this officer, everything included.
Right.
80% of that, or whatever the number is, needs to be billed back to school, not just the, $35 an hour plus the health insurance. It's
Yeah.
everything that has to be budgeted on that.
That's why we have these conversations. It's,
And that's something the finance committee, be more
Yeah.
than sit down and try to figure out.
right. Yeah,
Yeah,
At least the 10
great.
weeks.
I was waiting to have that conversation until we meet about everything, but yeah, again, that's what we have this platform. To get both finance committees input, board of selectmen input, community.
Yeah, we want a regional school wouldn't matter, but
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Yeah.
The office is education.
Correct.
So it's actually gonna be an office in the school. So that office, obviously split evenly between the.
Right.
sorry, Mary.
It's just rational.
Yeah, I think the logic before was, well, it's a municipal vehicle that's only being used in Boylston. That's kind of where my logic was, but I'm
Yeah.
over.
Good. Any other questions, concerns, that final thoughts? Okay. I do want to thank you all for coming out tonight. I appreciate it. I know it's hard to get out on a school night and meet for this conversation. I want you to know that I think I can speak for John and myself, how much we respect all the different perspectives that we've heard tonight. We know that there's different perspectives out there about funding a resource officer and even the presence of one in our communities. So whether you agree or disagree with the idea, the fact that you're able to share that, our ability to have this conversation respectfully with one another is very, very important to both of us. I know to all of the administrators, the folks here. We thank you for the input you've given us, the criticism you've given us, which is fine. We will take that back and have the conversations and move forward with some decisions, next steps with this. So if you have any other further questions, John and I will both be here for a little while, and I'm sure Officer Goulding will be here as well, the administrators, so please feel free to stay with us. If you want to email me or email John tomorrow with some last thoughts, we're happy to take your input at that time as well. So thank you all for coming tonight.